The Primitive Engineering Solution. Chapter 1. The Glass Menagerie. The air in the Aethelgard observation habitat didn't just smell clean, it smelled clinical, like a surgical suite scrubbed with digitized lavender and filtered through 1,000 layers of ionic mesh. There was no dust here, no grit, no soul. Silas Vane sat on a chair made of solidified resonance, which felt like sitting on a very polite, very firm cloud. He hated it. He missed the smell of hot oil, the sting of metallic filings under his fingernails, and the honest, rhythmic clanking of a diesel generator. He adjusted his grease-stained jumpsuit, the fabric a jarring smear of charcoal gray against the pearlescent walls of their prison.
I'm telling you, Maya, if I have to drink one more cup of harmonized hydration, I'm going to start chewing on the walls just to remember what texture feels like. Look at this thing. It's not even a cup. It's a localized gravity field holding lukewarm water.
Silas grumbled, staring at the shimmering orb of liquid floating above his palm. His voice was a gravelly baritone, the sound of a man who had spent 30 years shouting over the roar of heavy machinery. Beside him, Maya Chen was cross-legged on the floor, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface that refused to give her the data she actually wanted.
It's supposed to be the pinnacle of molecular gastronomy, Silas. The Aethelgard don't do cups. They think containers are primitive. Why build a box when you can just tell the universe where the liquid is allowed to be? Just drink your tea and stop trying to find the off switch on the gravity emitter. I already told you, there isn't one.
Maya replied, not looking up. She was younger, her face etched with the focused intensity of a digital native, trying to speak a language made of music and light. Her buzzed hair shimmered under the habitat's shifting luminescence, which cycled through soft ambers and teals to mimic a day-night cycle that didn't exist this close to the galactic core.
Greetings, biological specimen, 42 Alpha. Your cortisol levels indicate a 12% increase in irritability. Would you prefer a recomposition of the atmospheric scent to earth rain or old paper?
The habitat's AI chimed, its voice a hauntingly beautiful chord of 3 simultaneous tones. It didn't come from a speaker. It vibrated directly into their inner ears. Silas winced, rubbing his temples.
I'd prefer a wrench, you overgrown wind chime, and a door that actually has a handle. This intent-based architecture is a nightmare. What if I want to leave but I'm feeling indecisive? Do I just get stuck in the wall?
Silas barked at the ceiling. He stood up, pacing the small, circular room. The Aethelgard Consensus called this a luxury suite, but to Silas, it was a high-tech petri dish. He reached into the hidden pocket of his jumpsuit, feeling the comforting weight of a smuggled roll of duct tape and a heavy-duty steel multi-tool. They were primitive artifacts the Aethelgard scanners had ignored as inert mineral clusters.
They aren't keeping us here to torture us, Silas. We're consultants. They want to understand how we managed to build a trans-warp drive using explosive chemical propulsion and unrefined iron alloys. To them, we're like monkeys who accidentally built a watch.
Maya sighed, finally closing her hologram. She looked at Silas, her eyes softening. She knew he was claustrophobic in the face of all this perfection. To a man who understood how every bolt and gear worked, a world of solid light was a world where he was useless. Suddenly, the amber glow of the room flickered. It wasn't a soft transition. It was a violent, jagged stutter. The floor beneath them hummed, not the usual soothing vibration, but a high-pitched, agonizing whine that set Silas's teeth on edge. Outside the transparent dome of their habitat, the nebula they were orbiting suddenly flared with a blinding, sickly violet light.
Alert. Harmonic distortion detected. Solar coronal mass ejection interacting with crystalline logic core. Error. Error. Purity of light cannot be verified. Initiating. Logic. Loop.
The AI's voice cracked, the beautiful chords turning into a dissonant screech before cutting out entirely. The shimmering orb of tea in Silas's hand suddenly lost its containment, splashing uselessly onto his boots. The pearlescent walls began to harden, the soft glow dying out, replaced by a cold, dull opacity that looked like frosted glass.
Silas? The interface is gone. My terminal is dead. I can't feel the environmental haptics anymore.
Maya whispered, her voice trembling in the sudden oppressive silence. The room was plunging into a deep, unnatural darkness, lit only by the dying sparks of the malfunctioning light emitters.
It's a total system crash. The perfect computer just saw a math problem it couldn't solve and decided to have a stroke. Welcome to the downside of over-engineering, kid. When your doors are made of light and the power goes out, the light stops being a door. It becomes a wall.
Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, rugged LED flashlight. He clicked it on. The beam was weak and yellow, but it was physical. It was real. He swept the light around the room. The elegant, curved exit was gone. In its place was a seam of solid, unyielding crystal. They were sealed in a tomb of dead light. Silas grinned, a hard, predatory look that didn't belong in a luxury suite.
Right then, the gods are paralyzed because their cloud palace broke. I guess it's time for the monkeys to show them how we handle a broken watch. Grab your bag, Maya. We're going to do some renovations,
He said, his voice echoing in the dead air. He stepped toward the wall, not looking for a sensor or a voice command, but looking for a stress point. He raised his heavy steel multi-tool, the metal glinting in the flashlight's beam. The age of harmony was over. The age of the hammer had begun. Chapter 2. The Lever of Archimedes. The darkness in the habitat was absolute, the kind of heavy, suffocating blackness that only exists when the very source of light is stripped of its soul. Silas's flashlight beam cut through the gloom like a dull yellow knife. The air was already growing stale, the scent of ionized oxygen replaced by the faint, metallic tang of cooling superconductors. Somewhere in the walls, the harmonic AI was still trying to reboot, producing a sound like a wet finger being dragged across 1,000 wine glasses, a rhythmic, agonizing screech that echoed in the marrow of Silas's bones.
Verification. Failed. The spectrum is impure. Door state. Indeterminate. Please. Sing. To. The. Core.
The system stuttered, the voice now a discordant rasp. Silas ignored it, kneeling beside the solidified resonance table he had been sitting on earlier. He shone his light on the base, where the shimmering material met the floor.
Silas, what are you doing? The AI is asking for a song. Maybe if we mimic the frequency of the opening chime, I can try to whistle the C major chord they use for the locks.
Maya started, her voice tight with panic. She was holding her own small datapad, its screen flickering with error messages that looked like chaotic sheet music.
Forget the singing, Maya. The choir director is dead. This table isn't resonance anymore. Without the power to keep the molecules vibrating, it's just a very expensive, very heavy hunk of crystallized carbon, which means it's exactly what I need.
Silas grunted. He gripped the edge of the table and heaved. The solid light didn't budge. He adjusted his stance, his heavy boots scuffing the floor as he searched for leverage. With a roar of effort, he wrenched the table upward. There was a sound like a gunshot, a sharp, crystalline crack, as the frozen light sheared away from the floor.
You just broke it. You literally broke a piece of the city. The Aethelgard say these structures are eternal harmonies.
Maya whispered, staring at the jagged, uneven base of the now detached table.
Everything breaks, kid. You just have to find the grain. Eternal harmony is just a fancy word for too expensive to fix. Now help me wedge this leg into the door seam,
Silas said, his breathing heavy. He carried the heavy table leg toward the frozen door wall. In the yellow light, the seam where the door should have slid open was barely visible, a hairline fracture in the smooth, frosted surface. He shoved the jagged edge of the table leg into the crack.
It won't work. That material is reinforced with molecular-level cohesion. It's designed to withstand a nuclear pulse.
Maya argued, though she moved to help him, her hands trembling as she gripped the improvised crowbar.
It's designed to withstand a pulse, sure. But is it designed to withstand 200 pounds of grumpy engineer and the basic laws of physics? Give me a hand. On 3, 1, 2, 3.
They threw their weight onto the end of the table leg. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low, tectonic groan vibrated through the floor. The unbreakable light wall began to scream, a high-pitched, grinding noise of crystal fighting metal. With a violent shuck thud, the door slab groaned aside 3 inches.
We actually did it. We pried it open.
Maya gasped, her eyes wide. She looked at the gap, then back at the table leg. To her, it was a miracle. To Silas, it was just Tuesday.
Lever of Archimedes, Maya. Give me a place to stand and a long enough pole and I'll move the world. Or at least this overpriced sliding door.
Silas stepped through the narrow gap, his flashlight sweeping the main corridor of the observation spire. The site was a nightmare of high-tech failure. The once glowing halls were dim and flickering. Thousands of Aethelgard were huddled against the walls, their frosted glass skin glowing a dull, sickly gray. Some were weeping, a sound like chimes in a storm. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were just waiting.
The harmony is broken. The light is deaf. We are silent.
A tall, slender Aethelgard stumbled toward them. His 4 arms were wrapped around himself, and the bioluminescent patterns on his face were a chaotic, flickering red. This was High Architect Valerius, the being who had designed their habitat. He looked at Silas, then at the heavy, jagged table leg in Silas's hand, and his eyes, large amber orbs, wrenched wide in horror.
What have you done? You have disrupted the form. You have brought ugliness into the sanctum.
Valerius hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disgust.
I brought a way out, Valerius. Your sanctum is a coffin right now. The solar flare fried your logic cores. Your AI is trying to divide by 0, and while it's busy doing that, your life support is cutting out.
Silas stepped closer, his boots loud and aggressive on the silent floor. He pointed his flashlight directly at the alien's face, making him flinch.
We cannot open the archives. The doors require a purity of frequency. We cannot sing. The terror has ruined our voices.
The architect slumped against a pillar, his 4 hands covering his face. To the Aethelgard, a broken computer wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a cosmic tragedy. They were so evolved, they had forgotten how to use their hands for anything but gestures.
Well, it's a good thing I'm tone-deaf then. Maya, check the atmospheric sensors. Architect, stop crying and show me where the main reactor is. If we don't reset the cooling pumps manually, this whole silent city is going to become a very loud crater.
Silas's voice was commanding, the tone of a foreman on a failing rig. Valerius looked at the human, this biological specimen in his dirty suit, holding a broken piece of furniture, and saw something he didn't understand. He saw a creature that didn't need the universe to be perfect to function.
The reactor. It is sacred. No one has touched it in 3 millennia.
Valerius whispered, his light patterns shifting to a confused pale blue.
3,000 years without a checkup? No wonder a little sunburp killed it. Lead the way, High Architect. It's time you saw what percussive maintenance looks like.
Silas shoved the table leg into Maya's hands and pulled a heavy wrench from his belt. He tapped it against his palm with a rhythmic, threatening clack. He didn't wait for permission. He started walking, his shadow stretching long and jagged across the pristine, broken halls of the gods. Chapter 3, The Gum Wrapper Bypass. The temperature in the main spire was rising with a sickening, steady rhythm. In a station built of solid light and focused sound, heat wasn't just a physical discomfort, it was an architectural disaster. The harmonic walls were beginning to soften, their sharp, crystalline edges blurring into something that looked like melting wax. The air was thick and tasted like scorched sugar, the smell of Aethelgard polymers breaking down at the molecular level. Silas wiped a thick bead of sweat from his nose, his jumpsuit now clinging to his back like a second grimy skin.
Keep moving, Maya. The air is thinning out. If we don't get the atmospheric scrubbers back online, we're going to be breathing our own exhales in 20 minutes.
Silas grunted, his boots making a wet, sticky sound as he stepped across a section of floor that was turning translucent and soft. Behind them, High Architect Valerius was barely keeping up. The alien's glass-like skin was fogging over from the inside, a sign of extreme Aethelgard heat stress. His forearms were twitching rhythmically, a desperate, unconscious attempt to retune his own body to the dying station.
The life symphony is dissonant. The sensors, they are screaming. They see the radiant interference from the star, and they believe the entire universe is on fire. They have shut down to protect themselves.
Valerius wheezed, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. He pointed a trembling hand toward a massive glowing sphere embedded in the wall ahead, the primary life support node. It was pulsing with a violent, jagged red light.
Silas, look at the interface. It's a Type 7 quantum thermostat. It doesn't just measure heat, it measures the emotional state of the air molecules. Because of the solar flare, the molecules are vibrating in a chaotic pattern. The sensor thinks the air is physically impossible, so it's locked the cooling valves. It's waiting for a logical temperature reading before it opens the pumps.
Maya explained, her hands flying over her flickering datapad as she tried to bridge the gap between human logic and alien poetry. She looked up, her face pale.
I can't hack it. The encryption is based on a prime number melody that changes every microsecond. I don't have the processing power to sing to it.
She shouted, frustration bubbling over. The heat was making her lightheaded.
You're trying to talk to it, Maya. That's your first mistake. You don't talk to a broken thermostat. You lie to it.
Silas said, stepping up to the glowing red sphere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled object, a stick of Terran cinnamon gum. He unwrapped it, popped the gum into his mouth, and held up the silver and paper foil wrapper.
What is that substance? Is that a nanoconductor? A frequency stabilizer?
Valerius asked, his amber eyes focusing on the tiny, shimmering piece of trash in Silas's hand.
It's a gum wrapper, Valerius. High-grade aluminum-backed paper. And this?
Silas pulled a small coil of copper wire from a side pocket, wire he'd stripped from a useless decorative lamp in their suite. Is a legacy bypass. Maya, I need you to find the intake lead on that sphere. It'll be the part that's vibrating the fastest. Silas chewed the gum vigorously, then stuck the wad of pink goo onto the back of the foil wrapper. He leaned in, peering at the sacred sphere. He found a small, recessed port where the ambient air was pulled in for harmonic analysis.
Silas, if you short-circuit that, the whole life support grid might collapse. That sphere is a sentient crystalline entity.
Maya warned, even as she pointed her flashlight to help him see the tiny, shimmering intake filaments.
It's not a god, Maya, it's a sensor. And right now it's overthinking. It needs a dumb reading.
Silas carefully pressed the foil wrapper over the intake sensor, silver side facing inward. He used the copper wire to bridge the gap between the foil and a nearby structural ground point, a solid metal strut that wasn't part of the light grid. The silver foil reflected the sensor's own internal light back at itself, while the paper backing and the gum acted as a thermal insulator, shielding the sensor from the actual heat of the room. The copper wire bled off the static noise from the solar flare. For a long, tense second, the red pulsing of the sphere became more frantic. Then, it stopped.
Temperature, normalized, harmony, restored, initiating, cooling, cycle.
The AI's voice was a flat, monotone whisper. Suddenly, with a sound like a giant's sigh, the vents above them groaned. A blast of freezing, recycled air slammed into them, so cold it turned their sweat into ice.
Impossible. You tricked the song. You used a piece of refuse to deceive the architecture.
Valerius fell to his knees, his forearms splayed out in shock. He stared at the gum wrapper, which was now stuck to the heart of his station with a piece of chewed candy.
I didn't trick the song, architect. I just gave it a reality check. Your tech is so smart it can't see the obvious. It was looking for a perfect answer. I gave it a good enough one.
Silas leaned against the wall, taking a deep, cold breath. He looked at Maya, who was staring at him with a mix of awe and mild disgust.
That was the ugliest piece of engineering I have ever seen. If my professors at the academy saw that, they'd strip my degree.
Maya said, a small, shaky smile breaking through her exhaustion.
It's only ugly if it doesn't work. Now don't get too comfortable. The cooling air is just a band-aid. Look at the floor.
Silas pointed down. The floor wasn't just soft now. It was vibrating. A low, subterranean thrum was rising through the soles of their boots. The violet light from the nebula outside was intensifying, bleeding through the translucent walls.
The reactor. The thermal shock of the cooling cycle is hitting the overheated core. It's going into a resonance cascade.
Maya's smile vanished. She checked her data pad, her face turning ashen in the flickering light.
We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole glass palace shatters into a billion pieces of radioactive dust. Architect, get up. We're going to the basement. I need to find something heavy to hit your reactor with.
Silas didn't wait for a response. He grabbed the heavy wrench from his belt and started running toward the gravity lifts, his heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoing like a drumbeat in the silent, dying city. Chapter 4. Percussive Maintenance. The elevator lobby was a masterpiece of Aethelgard aesthetics, a wide, circular platform of polished obsidian that usually floated on a cushion of gravitational harmonics. Now, it was just a ledge overlooking a 500-foot drop into a dark, humming abyss. The solid light lift cars had vanished the moment the power spiked, leaving nothing but an empty shaft that smelled like burnt magnets and ancient dust. Silas knelt at the edge, shining his flashlight down. The beam died long before it hit the bottom, swallowed by the gloom of the station's lower guts.
Dead as a doornail. I'm guessing your people didn't think to install something as primitive as a ladder or a set of stairs, did they, Valerius?
Silas asked, his voice echoing back up the shaft in a series of hollow, ghostly knocks. He stood up, wiping his hands on his thighs. He looked at the walls, searching for something, anything, solid.
Ladders? You mean fixed geometric ascension tools? Why would we scar the architecture with such permanent ugliness? The harmony was supposed to carry us. The lift is a thought made manifest.
Valerius whispered, staring into the dark hole with a look of profound vertigo. His long, slender fingers clutched at his own chest. To an Aethelgard, the idea of moving their own body weight through vertical space without the help of a computer was not just difficult, it was scandalous.
Silas, the reactor's resonance is peaking. The dampening fields in the basement are failing because they're tied to the same logic grid as the lifts. If we don't get down there to dump the heat into the heat sinks manually, the core will vent. This whole spire will become a very pretty, very radioactive chimney.
Maya said, her voice tight. She was already stripping the casing off a nearby maintenance panel. Her hands were steady, but Silas could see the sweat beads on her upper lip. She knew the math. They were running out of time.
Then we're taking the express route. Maya, find me those heavy-duty power conduits we saw on the subfloor, the ones wrapped in woven carbon fiber. They can hold 3 tons of tension. Architect, I need your help. Move that decorative pillar, the one that looks like a giant glass toothpick.
Silas barked orders like a drill sergeant. He was already pulling a heavy roll of duct tape from his jumpsuit.
Help? I am an architect of essence. I do not pull things.
Valerius stammered, his bioluminescent skin flashing a defensive bright orange.
Today you're a pack mule, architect. Move it or start practicing your death song, because that's the only harmony you'll have left in 10 minutes.
Silas's glare was as cold as the void outside. The alien, cowed by the sheer, blunt force of the human's will, moved toward the pillar. Together, they dragged the heavy, crystalline beam toward the edge of the shaft. Silas used the duct tape to lash 3 thick power cables together, creating a makeshift braided rope. He tied one end to the pillar and tossed the rest into the darkness. The sound of the cable hitting the walls, a rhythmic thwack, 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 was the most real thing that had happened in this station for centuries.
It's a 500-foot drop, Silas. If the knots slip, or if the cable shears on the ledge...
Maya looked at the improvised pulley system. It looked like a nightmare of ugly engineering. It was messy, it was dirty, and it was the only thing between them and a long fall.
Then don't let go. I'll go first to test the tension. Maya, you follow. Architect, you're coming too. I'm not leaving you up here to faint.
Silas didn't wait. He gripped the cable, wrapped it once around his leg for a friction break, an old rigger's trick, and stepped off the edge. The descent was a blur of shadows and the smell of hot rubber. The cable bit into Silas's hands, the friction heat radiating through his gloves. Every few yards, he had to kick off the wall to keep from spinning. He could hear the groan of the glass pillar above as it took their weight. In the darkness of the shaft, Silas felt more at home than he had in the perfect suites. Here, it was just him, gravity, and the strength of the materials. It was honest. They hit the bottom with a jarring thud. The basement was a complete contrast to the upper levels. There were no light walls here, no harmonic music. This was the low-tech floor, the place where the Aethelgard kept the massive, heavy machinery that actually ran the city. It was a forest of giant, humming turbines and massive, glowing pipes that looked like frozen lightning. But now, those pipes were glowing a dangerous, angry purple.
My God! Look at the pressure gauges. They're all in the red, but the automatic release valves are locked. They're waiting for a digital signature from the High Architect to open.
Maya gasped, pointing at a massive circular valve that was shaking with the pressure of the superheated coolant trapped behind it.
I cannot give the signature. My interface port is clogged with the atmospheric dust. The system, it does not recognize me.
Valerius cried out, his voice a pathetic whimper. He was frantically rubbing at a small, glowing socket on his wrist, but the station's sentient computer was in a full logic spiral. It had forgotten who its creators were.
Out of the way, Valerius. If the computer won't listen to your wrist, maybe it'll listen to my friend here.
Silas stepped toward the massive, intelligent valve. He didn't look for a keypad. He didn't look for a light sensor. He gripped his heavy steel wrench with both hands. He felt the vibration of the steam through the floor, a rhythmic ticking bomb. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling for the point of maximum tension in the metal.
Silas, what are you doing? That's a Class 10 containment seal. If you damage the housing...
Maya started, but Silas was already in motion.
It's called percussive maintenance, kid. Sometimes the only way to fix a brain-dead computer is to remind it that it's made of matter.
With a grunt of pure, concentrated effort, Silas swung the wrench. He didn't hit the sensor. He hit the manual bypass lever, a piece of emergency backup hardware that hadn't been touched since the station was built. The sound was a deafening clang that rang through the entire basement like a funeral bell. The lever didn't move. Silas hit it again. and again.
Clang! Clang! Clang!
On the fourth strike, the lever groaned. A spark of real blue electricity jumped from the metal. With a screech of tortured crystal, the valve began to turn. Slowly, painfully, the perfect machine was forced to obey the laws of kinetic force.
Emergency. Override. Detected. Manual. Intervention. Is illogical. But accepted.
The AI's voice sounded defeated. A massive jet of steam erupted from a nearby vent, the pressure dropping instantly. The violet glow in the pipes began to fade back to a calm, steady blue. Silas leaned against the hot metal of the valve, his chest heaving, his hands shaking from the impact. He looked at the High Architect, who was staring at the dented lever as if Silas had just murdered a star.
You struck the heart of the consensus. You used raw violence to communicate with the divine.
Valerius whispered, his voice full of a terrifying new kind of respect.
I didn't strike the heart, Valerius. I just gave it a nudge. Your problem is you forgot that even a god needs a handle. Now don't just stand there. We still have to reset the main reactor, and I'm pretty sure that's going to require a much bigger hammer.
Silas wiped the grease from his wrench and looked toward the final chamber, where the core was pulsing like a dying sun. The most dangerous part was still ahead, but for the first time, Silas was smiling. He was a human, he was an engineer, and he was in a room full of things that needed to be hit. Chapter 5. The Ugly Victory. The reactor chamber was not a room. It was a cathedral of impossibility. A massive sphere of pure, swirling white fire hovered in the center of a glass-walled vacuum held in place by 18 beams of concentrated logic. It was beautiful, elegant, and currently it was vibrating so hard that the air itself felt like it was made of needles. The violet radiation from the solar flare outside had seeped into the containment field, turning the white fire into a bruised, angry purple. The floor, a bridge of translucent light stretching across the abyss toward the control pedestal, was flickering, turning from solid to liquid, and back again every few seconds.
Silas, the containment field is at 98% saturation. The harmonic dampeners are being drowned out by the star's interference. The reactor isn't just generating power anymore, it's trying to become a second sun.
Maya screamed over the deafening roar, a sound like a million glass flutes being shattered at once. She stayed at the edge of the bridge, her datapad uselessly displaying input error in 100 different languages.
Architect, where is the manual scram? Every reactor in the history of the universe has a way to drop the rods and kill the reaction. Where's yours?
Silas shouted, grabbing Valerius by his slender shoulders. The Aethelgard looked like he was made of smoke, his form blurring as the radiation messed with his molecular stability.
There are no rods. The core is a thought. To stop it, one must commune with the will of the consensus and persuade the light to rest. But the system, it is too loud. I cannot hear the will.
Valerius wailed, his forearms flailing. He gestured toward the central pedestal, where a shimmering, complex geometric shape of light was spinning wildly. It was the interface, a puzzle of light that required a calm, perfect mind to solve.
Persuaded to rest? You've got to be kidding me. You built a nuke that you have to ask nicely to stop exploding?
Silas let go of the alien and stared at the pedestal. He looked past the spinning light puzzle, looking for the ugly truth underneath. He saw it, a heavy black metal housing beneath the glowing interface. Even the Aethelgard, in their infinite arrogance, had built their thought-based reactor on top of a physical foundation.
Silas, don't! The bridge is unstable. If you fall through, there's nothing but the gravity sink down there.
Maya cried out as Silas stepped onto the flickering light bridge. He didn't run. He moved with a heavy, deliberate rhythm, timing his steps to the solid pulses of the floor. Each time his boot hit the light, a shower of sparks erupted, the material groaning under the weight of his unrefined physical mass. The heat was agonizing. Silas could feel the hair on his arms curling, the smell of singed fabric filling his lungs. He reached the pedestal just as the bridge behind him vanished into a mist of gray particles. He was stranded on a tiny island of glass in the middle of a dying star. The light puzzle in front of him was a blinding kaleidoscope of colors, spinning faster than the human eye could follow.
Biological. Anomaly. Detected. Access. Denied. Please. Provide. Harmonic. Clearance.
The AI's voice boomed, now sounding like a god in its death throes.
Here's my clearance, you glorified lamp.
Silas didn't try to solve the puzzle. He didn't try to persuade the light. He raised his heavy steel wrench, the metal now glowing a dull red from the ambient heat. With a guttural roar, he brought it down, not on the light puzzle, but on the delicate glass emitter plate that projected the interface. Smash! The light puzzle shattered into 1,000 jagged sparks. The AI let out a final distorted shriek of "Blasphemy!" and went silent. But the reactor didn't stop. It grew brighter.
Silas, you killed the controls. We can't stop it now.
Maya's voice was filled with despair.
I didn't kill the controls, Maya. I cleared the workspace.
Silas shouted back. With the glowing light show gone, he could see the skeleton of the machine. Beneath the broken glass was a heavy industrial-grade emergency lever, painted a bright, jarring red. A color that the Aethelgard had likely hidden because it didn't fit their aesthetic. It was a physical fail-safe, a mechanical bridge that would manually drop a lead and boron blanket over the thought core. Silas grabbed the lever. It was stuck, frozen by centuries of neglect and the heat of the core. He braced his feet against the pedestal, his muscles screaming, his face turning a deep, dangerous purple. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled again, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird.
Come on, you ugly, beautiful bitch, move!
He screamed, the sound of a human refusing to be beaten by a machine. There was a sound like the world breaking, a deep, metallic thunk crunch as the rusted gears finally turned. The lever slammed down. For a second, the universe went white. Then, a massive, heavy slab of dull, gray metal, hidden in the ceiling for 3,000 years, dropped with the force of a guillotine. It slammed into the center of the white fire, snuffing it out instantly. The roar stopped. The vibration stopped. The heat vanished, replaced by the sudden biting cold of the vacuum shielding. Silence fell over the cathedral. A heavy, thick silence that felt like a blanket. Silas slumped against the pedestal, his breath coming in ragged, freezing gasps. He looked down at his hands, blistered, greasy, and shaking, and then at the ugly red lever. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. A few minutes later, the emergency backup lights flickered on, dim, buzzing fluorescent tubes that the Aethelgard used only for maintenance. Maya and Valerius picked their way across a now solid metal catwalk that had deployed when the light bridge failed. Valerius looked around the room, his face unreadable. The sanctum was a mess of broken glass, dented metal, and the smell of burnt rubber.
It is so quiet. The song, it is gone. You have saved us, but at the cost of our perfection. The city, it will never be harmonious again.
Valerius whispered, touching a dent Silas had made in the pedestal with a trembling finger.
Good. Perfection is just another word for fragile, Valerius. You built a world that couldn't handle a sneeze from a star. You forgot that the universe isn't a song, it's a construction site.
Silas stood up, leaning heavily on his wrench. He looked at Maya, who was staring at him with a quiet, fierce pride.
We should get to the hangars, Silas. The Aethelgard fleet is going to have a lot of questions.
Maya said softly.
Let 'em ask, and tell them to bring their best lawyers, because I'm charging them double for this consultation. Percussive maintenance doesn't come cheap.
Silas started walking toward the exit, his boots echoing with a solid rhythmic clump, clump, clump on the metal floor. As they reached the hangar, they looked out at the vast, silent galaxy. To the Aethelgard, the universe was a delicate symphony that had just been interrupted. But to the humans, it was just another day of fixing what the gods were too elegant to touch. Because in a galaxy of light and music, it's the ones who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty who truly inherit the stars.